Thank the Logan Library for providing a beautiful venue for us, and the USU Writing Center. We'd also like to thank them for helping out with this. We have Cafe Ibis coffee in the back. I've been told that it's decaf because they're convinced that that's kind of an incentive. Looking at the crowd, I don't know if it is. Maybe. A couple people said, yeah. Get some though. It's worth it. So I'm really excited about tonight personally just because of our guest, because he and I have a history. I remember the first time I met Darren Edwards was, and I think there are several people in here from this, we took a class together as undergrads, and it was, I believe it was a writing class of some kind, and so early on I sat in the back, and I remember sitting next to some of the girls in the class, and it became pretty apparent pretty quickly that there was kind of the hot guy in the class, right? And it wasn't me. It was totally Darren. So that's kind of my first impression of him, which is, I guess, a pretty positive one. But I later came to learn that not only did he count as the hot guy, but he had the soul of a poet. And over the next few years, that soul kind of came out, and he started to write about his own truths and his own beauty. And his work has been published on telephone poles. He published, my first poem was published, and I can think of no better way to have a poem published than to have it plastered on a telephone pole. It was amazing. In university literary journals, and he has performed his poetry and prose since then in front of audiences as small as one. He says his mom makes a great crowd, and cookies, and as large as 500 or more people on the national stage. The first photos he ever took were with a Quaker Oats canister that he turned into a camera. He spent years as a skate punk kid documenting the best tricks and skaters he could surround himself with, his friends. Later he would spend years doing photojournalism. His first book of photography and writing was published in 2017 by History Press. It explores the early history of climbing in Utah. This bad boy is the new deal, and I am very excited for this. It's $5, right? It is now, because I said it in front of you. And are you going to read some?
Yeah.
It's amazing. I'm really excited for this. Like, I'm kind of giddy. I'm a little bit of a fanboy, but fortunately, Darren Edwards can still be considered a hot guy. I think we're still at that point, but I think he has much more to offer than that tonight. So, everybody, welcome Darren Edwards.
Yeah.
That might be the most flattering intro I have ever been given. Thank you. I spend most of my day teaching high school students who have nicknamed me variously Deadwords, the Eggman because I'm bald, and the stylish hobo guy. So it's nice to hear positive things as well. I'm going to do a couple things. I'm going to read a short section from my book that I did with History Press. That's photos of climbing in Utah and researched creative essays about the first people that went out and bolted routes in some of the major areas. And so I'm going to read, I usually read a section about Wasatch, the Wasatch Front, because I like it. But this is Logan, so I'm going to read a little bit from the Logan chapter. This is kind of in the middle of the Logan chapter. It says, as happened in so many other areas, the local rangers quickly took exception to this new, seemingly aggressive user group. I should probably point out, for those that don't know a lot about climbing, so there's always been trad climbing, traditional climbing, where they go up and they place their protective gear in a crack, and that's how they protect themselves from a fall. But in the late 70s, early 80s-ish, a new trend called sport climbing started, where they would actually put a metal bolt into the wall as a permanent anchor, and then that's how they would do routes. And this caused a massive cultural conflict in the climbing community and in the outdoors community. They saw it as unethical, they saw it as all kinds of things. And so it made the sport more accessible, which tended to cause more traffic, which made some of the rangers nervous. So that's kind of what it's talking about there. So as happened in so many other areas, the local rangers quickly took exception to this new, seemingly aggressive user group, especially in its potential to negatively affect the McGuire Primrose. Years ago, when I lived in Logan, I worked on a project for the Mountain West Center for Regional Studies. They wanted to create an oral history of land use in Logan Canyon. We were sent out with recording equipment and a list of phone numbers and addresses for people who had been influential in the canyon's history. One of the names on my list was Scott Bushman, a former Forest Service fire chief. At one point in my conversation with Bushman, we hit on the topic of sport climbing. I was against it. I was not just against it, I was passionately against it, stated Bushman, a trad climber himself. One of the issues Bushman felt they could use to help control the development of sport climbing in Logan Canyon was the presence of the McGuire Primrose. Through a series of sit-down meetings, the growing climbing community, including climbers like Matt Kupel, his wife Deb Kupel, Sinclair, Scherner, Monsell, and Doug Hansen, among others, were able to come to an understanding with the Forest Service and establish a climbing management plan that would restrict bolting or climbing to areas away from the presence of the McGuire, but still allow climbers to develop new routes elsewhere. For the climbers, this meant giving up some established climbs, like Hobbit Hole, Standard Direct, and Bob Sinclair's 512, which may have been the first true sport route in the canyon, as well as some undeveloped walls that may have held promising projects. All in all, it was a concession the climbers were willing to make. In a way, Logan climbers almost became protectors of the Little Flower. Every guidebook I've ever seen for Logan Canyon, including the most recent one by Casey Hare, Northern Utah Limestone Climbing, contains a section about the McGuire Primrose and how climbers should not only stay away from climbs that have been marked for the flower, but also report to the Forest Service new locations where the primrose is spread. So we sacrifice, if you can call it that, a small portion of our recreational ease while we work for a productive relationship between nature with its finicky needs and man with our desire for self-exploration. So that's, I don't want to read too much of that, but so that's this, and I have them for sale over there because my publisher likes us to say that. So now on to the more energetic stuff. Fortunately, I only have one piece I think that I've ever done here before, so this is largely the term we use in the slam community is new shit. So I'm really excited to have new shit for you. I'm going to start off vaguely political, and my pages are all mixed up, but that's okay because I can work with that. I'm going to start off not vaguely political, really political. And this is, I found, so in going to the National Poetry Slam a number of times as a competing poet, I found I am a white man. I am the privileged of the privileged. I am not part of any marginalized group, so there are a lot of issues that are not my issues really to write about, right? It's not my job to tell those people's stories, so I had to explore how to then share a voice on those things, and I found it in owning up to things, in owning up to being part of the problem, and in owning up to the history, and not in a, oh, look at what these people have done, but in a look at what we have done way. So this is a poem called The Six Grandfathers. It is said that the carving of Mount Rushmore had no fatalities. None of the 400 workers and artisans were killed during the construction of the 60-foot sculpture meant to commemorate the first 130 years of American history. It is said that the carving of Mount Rushmore had no fatalities, that no American blood was spilled along the faces of Washington and Lincoln, Jefferson and Roosevelt, never mind the blood of the Lakota who fought to retain their sacred mountain, the Six Grandfathers, not yet imprinted with founding fathers' faces, the mountain where Black Elk wandered in spiritual journey. It is said that the carving of Mount Rushmore had no fatalities, no compensation paid due to grieving white widows, and of course none owed to the indigenous people, the Sioux and Oglala families with missing fathers and brothers who fought to retain the land we had promised them would remain theirs in the Treaty of Fort Laramie. But we've never been very good at keeping our word. Indian givers, the lot of us. It is said that the carving of Mount Rushmore had no fatalities because culture can't be killed. No headstone for heritage is written out in treaties that demanded the Lakota move closer to the white man's way of life. Nothing to remind us of our sins, just voices lost in the dust that sweeps over the land of their ancestors. Our history books praise Rushmore as a sign of American grit and ingenuity, a shrine to democracy. And there couldn't be a more honest memorial to 130 years of broken promises and coercion, genocide and deracination. It is said that the carving of Mount Rushmore had no fatalities, that every tourist footprint is just one more penny in the coffers, not another shovel covering red sands with white dirt. Okay, so we're just going to get the heavy stuff out of the way first. This is, a lot of my stuff isn't super personal. This is probably the most personal piece I ever wrote. It's a persona poem, and so for those of you that aren't familiar with that, the idea is you are speaking in the persona of somebody else. One of my favorite ones, Seth Walker has a poem where he performs in the persona of a tree that a kid he knew committed suicide from. And so they can be very powerful in that way. This one is called Depression's Vows. I take you to be my partner for life. In those moments when you feel so alone the blackness could swallow you whole, when the loneliness is a blanket stitched together with the things you can't seem to make yourself do, when the only thing colder than your skin is the sweat pressing out of it, I will be with you. When you haven't been able to shower in weeks, when the idea of getting out of bed is more than you can take, when exhaustion follows you like a cartoon rain cloud, I will be with you. When your irritation at something insignificant explodes, and you excuse yourself from your family to pound knuckles into the heavy bag in the garage again and again and again until your skin tears, until blood streaks across the bag, until you collapse on the cold concrete, your chest heaving, reaching for breath that is not there, I will be with you. I promise to never let your accomplishments scare me off, to keep you on your toes, so that no one can expose you for the fraud you really are. I will be your ally against the world. I will do everything I can to help you grow away from life, away from those whose love you might question, from opportunities that could end in failure. I promise to embrace your faults and weaknesses, to never ask you to be more, to always accept that the worst of you is you. I know not everyone thinks we belong together. I know that some of your friends don't want to acknowledge that I even exist, but you can feel me in every part of you. I know you will test my loyalty by trying to push me away with drugs and therapy, but I am patient, and I will wait. And when I return, when once again you've lost interest in the things you love, when you don't have the energy to feed yourself, when simply existing seems to ask too much of your body, then, when you go from that feeling of nothing to being so full of rage, it's like your muscles are vibrating. When you shake with the pain of the pent-up energy as if all that had been missing for weeks came back in a burst, I will take your hand. It's a bad moment to lose my place at. Sorry. I will take your hand and slam it into your head until the bursting that runs through your body is replaced with a numb stinging in your temple, because at least that's a pain you can deal with. And when you're there, huddled on the floor in the dark, rubbing your temple and honestly wondering if you can give yourself a concussion, and you feel pathetic, less than human, ashamed to leave the room and have to explain the noises to your wife, when all you want is to go to her, but you can't imagine how she could still love you, I will be there. I will wrap my arms tight around you, pull you tighter until the shaking stops, tighter until you're nothing but numb, tighter until you can't breathe, tighter until I'm all you have left. Okay, so, we were talking about this at dinner before the event. I work doing something I never thought I would do. I teach at a high school, which I never in a million years thought I would do, but it's the coolest high school in the world. And so, anyways, it's not, I hope the way that's written, you don't need to know that our school mascot is the Dragon Slayer. But it's actually cool because we're St. George Academy, and we're in St. George down in southern Utah, but we actually named it St. George after the saint, and just to piss people off, and it worked. And so we're not named St. George after the city, we're named St. George after the Dragon Slayer. Anyways, so this is called Dragon Slayers, but hopefully that's not too important to it. I emphasize to my students the importance of building beliefs upon evidence, not evidence upon beliefs. I teach them that unanswered questions are far less dangerous than answers unquestioned. See, I am a high school teacher, so every day the future sits in front of me and I can see in their eyes the size of the dragons they face. The size of the fight that stands before them, fending off fire with one hand while trying to rebuild the castle walls with the other. we aren't simply asking them to survive this world, which can be overwhelming in itself, but we're also asking them to repair the damage of others, the damage done by the firestorm of me-first bourgeois unchecked capitalism and keeping up with the Joneses bullshit created by the boomers and the hippies turned yuppies, the storm that my generation stood and screamed uselessly into as it continued to rip the walls down around us. But this generation, these teens who giggle with the same cracking voices as each generation before them, dreaming about first kisses and big games, homecomings and proms, just like we all did, have nightmares riddled with bullets and the blood of their friends. See, some of their dragons have talons meant only to shred flesh. The responsibilities these youth bear and the obstacles they face are more unfair than anything I have ever had placed before me. Yet, so I teach them that correlation is not causation, to check sources, to step away from claims they can't support. I don't tell them they can be anything they want, or that if they shoot for the moon and miss, they'll still land among the stars, because that's not how things work. And these kids don't need platitudes and cliches. Chicken soup for the soul can't heal bullet wounds, and there is no secret that will make a broken world hurt less. So I teach them how people process information, the rhetorical triangle and cognitive dissonance. And they look at me with these bright, heavy eyes, and they ask me questions about Salinger and O'Connor, about the power of metaphor and how best to organize their thoughts. And I am grateful for their grace, because I know they have other questions I can't hope to answer. How do they fix a system built to keep them down? Why is it their responsibility to put things back together when the people who broke them are still around? When did putting your life on the line become a prereq to gaining an education? How is any of this fair? I don't have the answers to these questions, but I will not let them give up because they're worth it. Because I believe they can take these intellectual building blocks and forge solutions to problems they can't even grasp yet, rebuilding society's crumbling walls, because in their eyes, I see more than burden and responsibility. I see fierceness and an unrelenting will. I see dragon slayers sharpening their blades. Okay, so I have two more poems I'm going to do, but before I do that, I'm going to do, so this is what Russ was talking about. This was a project that took me a long time to do, and the story behind it real quick is I had a child 2.5 years ago, and I am a former Mormon, and as I was walking around rocking my son as a child, you want to sing to your kid, right? And the only songs I knew, children's songs to sing to my kid, were LDS children's hymns. And so I'm walking around, no longer a member of the church, singing, I hope they call me on a mission. No, I fucking don't. And so I decided there had to be other people that were in the same position, right? That wanted to reclaim these songs from their youth. And so I took a selection of the LDS children's hymnal and I rewrote it to better reflect the things that I would actually like to teach my son. And so I'm awaiting to be sued by the LDS Church. But it's actually interesting. So here's your quick Supreme Court copyright law lesson. So the Supreme Court decided in a case of, I forget the artist's name, he was a traditional singer that had a song called Pretty Woman. And Two Live Crew, the rap group, did a parody of it. And they borrowed pretty much the whole tune to do their parody. And after it sold 2 million copies, the original recording company decided to come after them for copyright infringement. And it went all the way up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court decided that parody was protected under fair use, because you can't actually parody something without using it. And so, as it says on the first page of this, very clearly, this work is a parody of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints hymn book. It is meant to both present contrast to some of the lessons taught in their hymns and to provide connection for former members to their youth, a connection they can pass on to their children without compromising their new standards and beliefs. So, I'm just going to read a couple for you because I can't sing for shit. And so that's why I want to sing to my kid now before he can be like, Dad, shut up. So I'm just going to read a couple to you. The first one I'll read is, it's based off of We'll Bring the World His Truth, right? That's the Armies of Helaman one. How many of you in here are Mormon or former Mormon? So you at least kind of know what I'm talking about. Okay, perfect. So it's no longer We Will Bring the World His Truth, it's Face the Difficult Truths. We have been born in privilege, truth told, in social casting like times of old. We can be blind or choose to see that we must fight for equality. Lift the voice of those in the margins, support them in sharing their truth, and we can change the world for the better till none are silenced or bound. We are here now, and these are our days, to fight for freedoms regardless of race. Things aren't fair, and this we can see. Let's rise up from our conformity. Lift the voice of those in the margins, support them in sharing their truth, and we can change the world for the better till none are silenced or bound. The truth is hard and bias abounds, but learning of others can break the walls down. Open our minds to their point of view, broaden the lens with which we can see. Lift the voice of those in the margins, support them in sharing their truth, and we can change the world for the better till none are silenced or bound.
Yes.
So I was trying to decide which second one I would do, because there's some that I just love, and it was interesting as I looked at these, and I don't want to offend anybody else, LDS, this is not meant to be anti-Mormon at all. As I looked at the hymns, there were some where I was just like, what in the world? Even the tune to Book of Mormon Stories is racist, right? I can't even. Anyways, so I changed Book of Mormon Stories to the scientific method, and it now takes you through the steps of the scientific method. I did a lot of things like that. One of my favorite ones is I took Pioneer Children, which I hated as a kid, because it's just the, and walk, then walk, then walk. And I changed it to some people just talk and talk and talk. But the last one I'll sing or read for you was Search, Ponder, and Pray. And I wanted at least one of these to just be kind of like a love song to my boy. And so this is super cheesy, I know. But this is my one specifically to him. You are the very best of me, my life and light and love. My light and love and life. Your smile melts my heart, no matter if you start to disobey me, sad but true. Dance, smile, and laugh are the things I'd have you do. Be carefree for now, learn from mistakes, and know that I will love you. So don't worry about the future. Growing up life can wait. You'll come to understand, to make life what you can, and love others as I've loved you. Dance, smile, and laugh are the things I'd have you do. Be carefree for now, learn from mistakes, and know that I will love you. So, super cheesy, and I have those back there as well. So, I also, this is the really obnoxious part where I'm I have merch, right? I have these, I have prints, I have stuff, and that's all I'll say. So, this one is the one that I've done here before, and I actually had it memorized back then, but I don't now because I don't perform that often anymore. Privilege. As a noun, the word privilege is defined as a special right, advantage, or immunity granted or available only to a particular person or group of people. For example, the last time I spoke at Utah State University, I had the privilege of not worrying that someone might attack me with assault rifles, multiple pistols, and a collection of pipe bombs. I have the privilege of living in a system that isn't pockmarked with loopholes legalizing prejudice against me, where I can walk away from a police officer, play my music loud, and eat Skittles without the fear of being fatally shot. I have the privilege of society understanding and accepting my sexuality and gender without question, of never having to hear my parents identify me by anything other than what I am, or fearing that my father may stab me to death because I'm trying to become more comfortable in my own skin. See, privilege might be a noun, but despite popular sentiment, it's not something I can own. No matter how hard I try, I'll never fully understand the struggles the color of my skin and my possession of a penis exempt me from. And know that if I ever say that I can or do, it's just a cover story for throwing in the towel, because their pain has become too painful for me to think about. Thank God, privilege isn't just a noun. Privilege as a verb means to grant a privilege or privileges to someone. Because we live in a society where, however unjustly, my voice is often heard above the cries of others, because I am assured more safety, a bigger platform, and a fraction of the roadblocks so many others face, may God grant me the humanity to turn my privileges into action. To work toward a day when women like Anita Sarkeesian can speak their mind without a shitstorm of death threats, where names like Walter Scott, Jordan Davis, and Trayvon Martin are attached to their accomplishments, not obituaries, where the life stories of Layla Alcorn and Bree Golick don't end in tragedy, but go on in a beautiful exploration of self. I'm blessed that I can do this while avoiding some fucked up savior complex, because they don't need my white male greatness to help pull them up. What we need is for all of us to tear this system down.
Yeah.
So, I wanted to leave you on at least a somewhat happy note, right? I've been doing performance poetry for about a decade, a little bit more now. And a lot of stuff tends to be really dark, right? And when I first started doing features, I would just do like all dark stuff. And then I would look at the audience afterwards and I'm like, oh my God, what have I done to these people? I can't do this anymore. So I started like trying to mix in one or two light ones and kind of building an arc into the evening at some point so that they could take a breath. So this one, I did a run through last night with some friends, and I prefaced this one with like, this is super cheesy, and then they all yelled at me for saying that. So I'm not supposed to say that to you. It's super cheesy. So it's called Holy We. We were taught that we were born of dust, born into sin, that we must be cleansed to be made new, made holy. So we wash away the most intrinsic parts of ourselves. We scrub off our humanity, hoping to find something divine will grow back in its place. See, water is central to religious rites across the globe. Baptism, sacrament, ablution, wudu, misogi. It cleanses sins. It shines as an example of purity, reflecting God's light back to Him. Water is poured into a bowl before the dead in Buddhist funerals. Hindus make pilgrimage to the 7 sacred rivers. Muslims must wash to clean themselves before approaching God in prayer. See, we've been led to believe that we are God's broken and muddied toys, the puppies who can't seem to stop peeing on the carpet and nipping at each other. These, we are told, are sins of the flesh, and we are creatures of the flesh who must rise above our base instincts. But we are more water than flesh, so we are far more holy than not. Then let this be our gospel. We are not filth in need of washing. We are the bowl that holds the sacred water. We are the baptismal font, the sacrament cup. We are the rag heavy with water waiting to wash God's feet, cleanse Him of His sins, wipe the scales away from His eyes so He can finally see how holy we have always been. Thank you so much for having me. I look forward to hearing all your voices in the open mic.
Darren, that was wonderful, and I'd just like to say that I will take every opportunity to objectify you in front of a couple of them. Right now the sign-up list is pretty light, so if you have something to say, we'd love to hear it. I think I'll add myself right now. I'm going to put it in the back.
Put me on too.
Put you on too? Well, we have the same
I'm not
name.
really reading me though, but yeah.
That's fine. That's totally good.
And put Rowan on.
Ron, okay. Anybody else just up front? What's your name? Jesse. All right. Let's start with Britt Allen, Mia Jensen, and Chad Van Zanten. Pick up from there.
Is it going to be embarrassing if I turn the mic on at this point? Okay. As the kids say, I brought some old shit tonight, actually. And he just lifted the mood, but I'm going to take it back down. This is fine. This is fine. This is a slam poem I performed with the Bullpen Slam team a couple of years ago. And I haven't read it since, which I probably shouldn't admit, but I'm nervous. It's great. It's going to be great. It's called Selfish. My baby brother pissed himself every night last week. He's 7 years old, but he was potty trained at 3. He's back in diapers though, but only at night, only at home. He relies on second grade mercy when he soils himself at school, trying to hide in the corner of the library. His name is Edward. And when I saw him 2 days before Christmas, he could suddenly read. I never saw him sitting at the kitchen table, wrangling his R's or trapping his T's, but when I gave him a Game Boy, he showed me by reading the entire Pokemon intro scene. He's missing his 2 front teeth. When he was born, I took the first tear rolling down his cheek and put it in my mouth. I thought it would make him a part of me, a permanent savior, the biggest big sister whom he could only call Bitney when he was 3. I've only seen him twice since last year. It all drains back to the stepfather's fingers knuckling my prepubescent lips, but the betrayal of the mother demands another name I don't know how to say. What I do know is that in every cell swims a piece of him, my brother, and we share 50% of the same DNA, but the man who fucked my mother to father him fucked me the same way. What do I get to say when our mother knows and remarried him anyway? As an adult who prays I hold sway in my life, I can claim that I will never speak to her or him again. But what that means is I can't see Edward today or any day. I saw him before Christmas by sneaking in when his parents were away. CPS didn't investigate because it wasn't a first-hand knowledgeable claim. The urine, the fucking, the fact that I dare wave the biggest big sister flag without being willing to stand in the flame. The fact that I'm hung up while my brother hides his penis from eyes makes me feel like I'm trying to swallow the sky because I'm more ashamed of myself than angry for him. While I swear to God I want to save him, I can't even say I don't know how. But for some lie that lives inside my mind, I will not raise my cry for his small, gap-toothed smile. My baby brother pissed himself every night last week while I slept between clean sheets labeled selfish and free.
Right, thank you, that was wonderful. So I don't know what kind of a mood this will put you in. It's some strange one. This is a short story I've been working on. It's part of a series that I'm working on about Disneyland. It's called It's a World of Hopes and a World of Fears. Her parents don't see us snatch her flailing body from the boat. They never do. She has a little brother, cute kid. By the looks on her parents' faces, this is his first time at the park. Their eyes are too fixed on the baby's amazement to notice us drag their daughter into the chemical-stained blue water. She is too captivated by the appropriated replica of her home to hear us creep up behind her. The miniature windmills spin in her eyes. She smiles as she sees the animatronic milkmaids pivoting on their track. I wonder if she notices the gap between the other 2 Danish robots. Part of me hopes she does. Part of me knows it's best if she doesn't. The less she knows, the better. The words, "Though the mountains divide and the oceans are wide, it's a small world after all," are the last thing she hears before we shatter her world. We didn't always have to steal children. Back in the glory days of the ride, people would come from all over the